Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Zephyr Metaphysics 101. Always happy and glad to have you here with us. If you're tuning in for the first time, we just want to say welcome. We hope that this will not be your last time. If you are returning, I want to say thank you to those of you that have not only liked some of our videos, but have subscribed. We definitely appreciate you doing that because in you doing that, that causes YouTube to recommend the videos more. The more they see that you're liking and subscribing, the more they will recommend that others take a look at what we're putting out. So just want to say thank you for that. I'm going to move kind of quickly here because I got a few things that I want to cover. This episode will be a semi continuation of last week's episode when I went into Dr. Kinley and the experience that he had on June the 6th, 1931, and his vision and revelation of Yahweh Elohim. And so before I do that, I just want to say, because I did read a couple of the comments, and you had people who left kind of sarcastic comments, and whatever, that's fine, whatever, it's no big deal. I know that there are certain YouTube channels where if people do anything that the YouTuber or whatever you want to call it, the person creating the content does not like, they will block folks, which I find a bit bizarre. If you can't handle any type of disagreement or any type of rebuttal for someone that you don't like, that's just a bit strange to me. I knew from the very onset when I started Zephyr that there were going to be people that disagreed, and some would disagree vehemently. But that's okay. As long as we keep it respectful, I don't have a problem with you disagreeing. And I bring that up because, there was someone who on my Adam and Eve video went into a very long explanation about why they didn't agree. That's fine. I appreciate him giving his take on what he felt that Adam and Eve is all about. The thing that I would just keep in mind is this, and I say this very often. The Bible is a book of symbols. You all have heard me say that in many of my videos. And the thing about symbols, Paul said over in Romans 1:19 and 20, he said, you take the physical to understand the spiritual. You take the visible to understand the invisible, or the natural to understand the so-called supernatural. So with the Bible being a book of symbols, what you have to understand about symbols is that one symbol can mean many things. I think it was the author Emmett Fox who said that Adam represented the physical body and Eve represented the soul. I don't have any problem with that. You can take that allegory and use it that way as well. You see, just to get into different things that have more than one meaning. You see, I was just thinking about, that situation over there in Genesis where it talks about the serpent being more subtle than any beast of the field. You see, now you got one serpent being used in a negative connotation. You see, a snake or a serpent. You see, being used as the deceiver. Yet over in Numbers, the 21st chapter, I think it's about the ninth verse, Moses is commanded to take a bronze serpent, and hold it up, the image of that bronze serpent, and hold it up. And all those that had been bitten out there in the wilderness of Sinai, if they looked upon that bronze serpent, would be healed. So you have the serpent being used in Genesis, with negative connotations as the deceiver, and yet over in Numbers, the serpent, the same animal, is being used with a positive connotation. You can say the same about a lion. I think Peter talks about over in First Peter 5:8, I think it is, where he says, where he talks about a lion going about seeking to devour. And yet all throughout the scriptures, it refers to the Messiah as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So you have one lion, one animal being again referred to with two different types of connotation, one positive and one negative. I could use the physical body. The Messiah, when he was speaking to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, he said that they were full of dead man's bones. White wall sepulchres full of dead man's bones. In other words, he was saying that, and the bones really represent the soul. So he was saying that they were dead souls, and their bodies weren't nothing but a grave for those dead souls. Yet the Apostle Paul, over in 1 Corinthians 6:19, he refers to the body as a temple for the living Elohim. So the one body can either be a temple for the living God, or if the spirit has still not been quickened, you see, it's a grave for a dead inner being, you see, or a being that is still spiritually dead and spiritually unillumined. You understand what I'm saying? So when we get into these allegories, I don't feel the need to get into some back and forth with anybody about, no, this is what it represents, and no, this is what it represents. It could represent in a plethora of different things, you see. The bottom line is to keep in mind that it's not about Adam and Eve. You see, that's an allegory, you see, something physical that the Spirit is using to get you to see something spiritual, you see. And hopefully you are extracting the spiritual essence out of it, not getting caught up on whether the rib represented one thing or represented another thing. Again, if you want to have that conversation, I don't mind. I'm not afraid to have it with you, you see. But the bottom line is when one thing can represent many things, you see, the thing you have to understand, or the thing you would want to understand, is this is something that Dr. Harris used to share with us often. He said, listen, children, the Bible speaks about many visions and many revelations. There were you can open up the Bible to any prophet that you want to mention, Obadiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, whoever you want to mention. And that person is having a vision and a revelation from the creator. And it was Dr. Kinley who said that the vision was coming from within him. He said it wasn't something for so long, I thought, being a kid hearing about Dr. Kinley's vision, that the vision was being showed to him externally. He said, no, it was Yahweh Elohim in me giving the vision. You see, in other words, the vision was not something external that he was beholding. It was taking place within the confines of his consciousness, within the confines of his awareness. The Creator was revealing himself, you see. And to be honest with you, if I can get straight to the surmise of what I want to talk about today, you see, the self same thing that happened to the prophets, the self same thing that happened to the apostles, the self same thing that happened to the Jews on the day of Pentecost in the upper room, the self same thing that happened to Dr. Kinley, the self same thing that happened to Neville Goddard, the self same thing that happened to countless others, wherein the Messiah revealed himself within them, must happen to you and I. That is really the meaning of grace or salvation. Salvation is not you. I could say a million things. Helping the old lady across the street. That's something you ought to do anyway if you see that the old lady needs help. Salvation is not you going to church on Sunday. I just told you, Paul said that your body was the temple of the Holy Spirit. So you should always be in church. Church shouldn't just be when you show up to somebody's building. You see, salvation is not you feeding the multitudes, you see, or tithing with a certain proportion of your wages. Salvation is when the Creator, Paul said, when it pleased the Messiah to reveal his son, or when it pleased the Father to reveal his son in me. The Son of salvation must be revealed in you, you see. And when that happens, you see, then the mystery is over for you. You see, there's nothing left to argue about. That same Paul said, without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. In other words, I'm not arguing with anybody about it. That's why Paul said it was without controversy. It wasn't that there wasn't going to be controversy. Paul just said there is no controversy for me anymore about the situation. I'm not arguing with anybody about the fact that the Father revealed his Son in me. And when that self same Father, and listen, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. Well, the prophets and all of them, that happened 2,000 years ago, you see. And Dr. Kinley did his best to get across to us that although his vision was special, although the revelation was special, there was nothing uniquely special about him that the Creator decided to pick him out of however many 3 billion people that there were on the planet at that time. The prophets of old, whoever they were, I told you we don't know what their real names were. See, because Isaiah's name was not Isaiah, Jeremiah's name was not Jeremiah, Obadiah's real name was not Obadiah, you see, but that was the title of those books. But whoever they weren't thought of as being so special by the Creator, you see, that he just chose to reveal the mystery within them. You see, that they only taught and preached everyone who experienced salvation, turned around and taught and preached so that you and I would begin to look within for that self same mystery or salvation could be revealed within us. And once you have that happen, you see, your life here on earth, you see, is completely changed. In what way? Does that mean that you'll go from having white skin to black skin or black skin to white, from having green eyes to blue eyes or blue eyes to brown? No. From having curly hair to straight hair? No. From being 5 foot tall to 6 foot tall? No. Does it necessarily mean that you'll go from having $500 in the bank to having $500 million in the bank? No. But what will change? What will be revolutionized, as Dr. Kinley said he was revolutionized, is the way you see yourself, the way you see your creator, and the way you see your fellow man. That will be completely changed. So I just wanted to get that out because I know that there's going to be people coming in on the comments, some sincere and some just wanting to be, wise guys and smart Alex. And that's completely fine too. I can handle wise guys. I can handle smart Alex. It don't never mind me. But I will say this, if you feel so strongly about however you think of something, my recommendation would be to not argue with me or try to convince me how wrong I am. If you feel like you're right, the best thing to do might be to start a channel. I mean, YouTube has a lot of space, it welcomes everybody. But the point is, if you feel strongly about something, then share it, you see, and you don't have to necessarily. And listen, I don't have a problem with you sharing it in the comments. I'm just saying, before I get into a back and forth with someone, my suggestion would be, you see, if that's what I did. I felt strongly about the things that I'm saying here. So the Holy Spirit put it on my heart and mind to start, you see, a podcast. You see. So anyway, just wanted to get that out. And again, thank you all for liking and subscribing, and I hope that you continue to do so. We're going to try to start putting out these shorts for you just to have something to meditate on where, it's not a whole hour show. You can just have a little something, click on for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever it is, and just have something hopefully that's beneficial to your day. Now, last week, I read Dr. Kinley's. I did my best to read it, y'all. I'm in a situation. My family keeps asking me, why don't I go get glasses? And I probably need to go on and do it because when you're looking at something and your eyes start watering up and you start doing all that and wondering if you read that part already, that means that you probably need help seeing. And you should probably be honest with yourself about that. So, but anyway, notwithstanding, I did go on and read Dr. Kinley's panoramic vision pamphlet. And I thought that that was so important because as I was just sharing, guys, you know, Dr. Harris used to say all the time, and he was just such a, and I'm not giving credit to the man, but I'm giving credit to the spirit that animated the man. He was a wise master builder and a wonderful teacher, as Paul said about himself. And he would do his best to get across to us, excuse me, to get across to us that the gospel is not the acquisition of a whole bunch of knowledge. You look at the Pope and his cardinals, they call it the princes of the church. And these men, many of them are fluent in at least 5 different languages. I think Pope John Paul II spoke over 20 languages, at least minimum. And these are men who have all these different degrees behind their names. And Dr. Kinley did have an honorary doctorate degree that he received from one of the liberal arts colleges out in Ohio. And I'll just share this with you. The way he received that degree is that he won a religious debate with a theological professor, I believe it was, about water baptism. I believe it was about water baptism. There was a couple of different debates that he had with folks, won all of them, by the way. Not trying to be funny, but he did. He won all of them. And that's not my opinion. That was the opinion of the observers. The reason he got that honorary degree from that university out in Ohio, and I used to know the name of it off the top of my head, I believe it was a liberal arts school, but I'll find out the name of it and I'll share it with you guys. But the reason he got that degree is because he was involved in a debate with a theologian, and that debate was judged by other biblical scholars from the university. And when the debate was over, the judges, the scholars said, this other man, and I don't know the gentleman's name. I'm sure if Dr. Harris were still here, he could easily tell me what the man's name was, and I'm sure other people within the school might know who it was that Dr. Kinley debated, because like I said, there were a couple of different debates. But when it was over, they said, this other gentleman does not know what he's talking about, but this man, Kinley, he's right on the money. So, because of that, and because they saw the excellency of what Dr. Kinley was presenting, they gave him or presented him with an honorary degree, an honorary PhD. And I know now you can just buy honor, and you can't buy them, but now they give them to people who donate, celebrities who donate and all that. But Dr. Kinley didn't have any money to donate to that school like that, you see. And this was back in the days where, they weren't just giving them to people simply because, they gave an endowment to the school or what have you, you see. Because like I said, Dr. Kinley didn't have that type of money, you see, but recognizing the excellency, like I said, of what he was presenting, they gave him that honorary PhD. Now, the other debate that I know of was with a minister out here in and I believe it was Los Angeles. Yes, it was Los Angeles. And one of the gentlemen that was supposed to be debating with Dr. Kinley, he got sick or bowed out at the last minute. And so there was another minister, I believe his name was Reverend Young, and he debated with Dr. Kinley, and he, called himself making light of the way that Dr. Kinley spoke, because Dr. Kinley, although he was a bibliomaniac, which means he was a lover of books, you see, and he studied after people like Socrates, Plato, and these other philosophers, just as a natural, just as a natural desire to acquire knowledge. And so, because of that, and I say that, let me just back up here, because I mentioned in the last episode that Dr. Kinley left the sixth grade because he wanted to help his parents, you see. And so the assumption would be, well, because he left school in the sixth grade in what he called the common elementary school, meaning that everybody learned in one room, the first grade, the second grade, the third grade. It wasn't like we have now where the first grade would go into one room, the second grade, the fifth grade, and so forth. The sixth grade, they would all go into a different room. Well, when Dr. Kinley was coming up, everybody was taught in the sixth in the same room, excuse me. And so he called that sixth grade common elementary. And he left, as I was saying, to help his parents. And so the assumption would be that, oh, he must not have been that educated then. And that would be the wrong assumption, because as I was saying, Dr. Kinley, he was just a lover of books. He was a bibliomaniac. You see, he just loved the acquisition of books. But getting back to this gentleman, Reverend Young was his name, that debated Dr. Kinley, and he made light of Dr. Kinley because Dr. Kinley kind of spoke with a broken English. However, he could turn around and start using these really polysyllabic words that nobody knew about or anything like that, that would make you just run to the dictionary. I mean, he did it all the time. Dr. Harris was a medical doctor with a PhD that had to study Latin. And he would tell us all the time that Dr. Kinley just kept him in the dictionary with words that he would use. And just, he would just sit there in amazement, being a Black man that went to college and earned an MD, and listening to this Black man who, you see, said that he didn't get further than the sixth grade common elementary school. And so I only bring that situation up with Reverend Young because although Reverend Young lost the debate, and whoever lost the debate was supposed to join the other's congregation. And not only were they supposed to join the other's congregation, but their entire congregation was supposed to join the other person's congregation. So that was the agreement. And although Reverend Young knew he lost the debate, you see, he refused to join the congregation or to join Dr. Kinley's congregation. However, there was another gentleman who was an assistant preacher in the church and a lower preacher in the church, if you will. He agreed to join Dr. Kinley in the school. His name was LaSalle Williams, Dr. LaSalle Williams. And although his minister refused to honor the deal or the agreement, Dr. LaSalle Williams agreed to honor the agreement. There was another time that Dr. Kinley debated with Jehovah's Witnesses, you see, and he won that debate. There were countless debates that Dr. Kinley won. And again, this is not just me as a fan or some sort, if you will, saying, oh, Dr. Kinley won. These people admitted that he won these debates, that he was 100% correct, you see. Yet some of them would come down to the school and hear what he had to say after he would win these different contestations with them. And others would say, to heck with you. I don't, yeah, you see, I hear what you're saying and I can't prove you wrong, but I refuse to give up what it is I formerly knew or formerly was taught. You see, and a lot of that was just stubbornness on their part. You see. Now, another reason why I wanted to go into Dr. Kinley's vision and revelation is because if you listen to it, and I really would encourage you to listen to it. Like I said, I'm going to try to see. Like I said, y'all know your friend over here. I'm not a tech person, but I will try to see if I can send it to my editor so that it can at least be on here so that you can have a link to look at it. But like I said, you can go and Google Henry C. Kinley, Panoramic Vision and Revelation, and you can read it for yourself. But one of the main reasons that I wanted to go into that is because not only did I want you to know who Dr. Kinley was and what he experienced, but in that pamphlet, he also goes into talking about the creation of the heavens and the earth and how that everything came in a threefold fashion. Now, I want to explain a little bit about that. And also, I mentioned this a little bit, I believe, last week because I wanted to kind of paint a little bit of the scene to where Dr. Kinley was when he had that vision and revelation. He was at his home in Springfield, Ohio, and as I said, that was in on June the 6th, 1931. And forgive me for not adding this in last week, but like I said, I was trying to be mindful of the time. And it was about 9 o'clock in the morning on June the 6th, 1931, that Dr. Kinley, he said, I was sitting in my living room, and this is the way he put it. He said he was admiring his wallpaper. And what happened is he just blacked out. He suddenly blacked out. And when he blacked out, that is when you get the first part of the vision with him talking about how he was, you see, whirled in and out of cosmic space, you see, and how he had seen the cosmic events unfold before him. Then later on, when his son and his wife, Katie, his son Clifford, his oldest son, and his wife, Katie, came downstairs and saw him crying, they thought that he was crying because he had suffered back injuries before. So they thought he was in pain. So they took him up to what he called the second floor landing, which to us would just be the second floor. And at that point, he blacked out again. And it was then when he said he received the revelation of what it is that he saw downstairs on the first floor. So when you're reading about him having this vision in Revelation, you might have been wondering, well, where was this happening? Well, what was he sleeping in the bed, or was he walking through the forest? No, he was at his home in Ohio. And he said on this particular day, he was just sitting there And he would say, as he would say, admiring his wallpaper, not doing anything, but kind of in a meditative state. And all of a sudden, he blacked out. And that is when you start hearing him talk about the first part of the vision, you see, and how he said he could feel Moses and the children of Israel. And when he began to say he was at that point in history where a revelation was about to be made. And I'm bringing all of this up because it is at that point that he begins to go into the tabernacle pattern. Now, I marvel at where we are in history because there was a time where if you ask somebody did they know about the tabernacle pattern, they would say no, or it would just be maybe only religious people, knew about Moses and the children of Israel and the tabernacle that was pitched over in Exodus, the 25th chapter, where the Creator says, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell amongst them." And we're going to kind of touch on that. And again, like I always say, we're not going to exhaust any of these things. I couldn't exhaust it in under an hour if I wanted to. But, you know, I'm just touching on these just to kind of lay a foundation that will pick up on other episodes. And so when he begins to speak about his experience, he starts talking about how he could feel the presence of a great source of power coming. Well, first, before that, he says that he had been commanded to lay his body down on the ground in the same place that Moses had been commanded to lay his down. And he goes on to say that they were not spirit minds, but they were merely carnal minds operating on a spiritual plane. And that ought to show you right there with what he was experiencing. Yet he said that that was not a spiritual mind that was experiencing that. That was a carnal mind freed, as he put it, from the shackles of the flesh temporarily. Now, that right there should show you the night and day difference between a carnal mind and a spiritual mind. Because the carnal mind is the five senses. Yet this man is saying that he's having this experience wherein he is being called to a certain place in history where a revelation is to be made, where Moses is being commanded to lay his body down on the ground. And he and Moses awaited the Elohim of glory. Now, I know some of you would be apt to believe Moses because you read it as if you believe Moses, yet somebody in your day saying, I had that experience too. And you're like, no, I don't believe that, especially a black dude. I know that because some of you won't even believe the divisions that Neville Goddard said he had, and he's a white man. And I'm just being frank with you. I don't mean any harm or any disrespect. And then here you have this black man who's uneducated in the world, you see, saying that he had this universal spiritual experience where the creator of heaven and earth is calling him to a time and place where Moses is getting ready to have the tabernacle revealed to him on Mount Sinai. But the thing about Dr. Kinley, one of the things that set him aside from so many is that not only did he say this, but he came back with illustrations of what he saw. Now, the only other person out of all the prophets, out of all the apostles, out of all the metaphysical teachers, including Neville, you see, who said that they had a spiritual experience and yet went about to draw illustrations of what they saw. The only person who did that was the Apostle Paul. Now, somebody say, I ain't never heard that the Apostle Paul had no parchments or no charts or any type of depiction of his revelation of the Creator. Oh, but he did, and it's in the Bible. You see, over in 2 Timothy 4 and about 8, Paul is the only person in the Bible who speaks about having a spiritual experience, because that's all these people are doing. Keep that in mind. When you think it's odd that somebody has said that they are having a spiritual experience, keep it in mind that that's all everybody in the Bible ever said. And they were looked at as being plumb crazy for saying it. It was, see, so many of us think, well, had I been back there in the Bible days and Isaiah walked up to me and said he had a vision of the Creator and you see, he's seen the creation unfold before him. And I would have been like, cool, Isaiah, let's do it. I mean, yeah, let's sit down and have some Bible school. No, you would not have. You wouldn't have done it with Isaiah. You wouldn't have done it with Jeremiah. You wouldn't have done it with Obadiah. You wouldn't have done it with Ezekiel. You would have stoned these people to death for, in your view, disrespecting the law of Moses, the Mosaic law, just like everybody else did. That is why all the prophets met their end by stoning or some other way of death, because, or really, they were just murdered, if you want to just say it plainly, because they were going against that Mosaic law that was given to the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. And really, they weren't going against it, you see. They were just telling them what the reality of that was, you see. But over in Timothy, the 4th chapter, and let's start at about the 8th verse. This is Paul writing to Timothy. And I'm just starting up a little to give you some continuity. It says, finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Now you got to be careful with Paul, because you got to ask the question, well, when did he appear, Paul? All those who have loved his appearing, what are you talking about? When did he appear? But Paul is being crafty, because what Paul is talking about is when he appeared in me. All those that have loved his appearing in me. He's not talking about some universal revelation being made unto mankind. You see, when he appeared in me, and not only in me, but in others on the day of Pentecost. So when we talk about God being revealed and God coming back, folks, we got to understand that these advents, you see, must take place in us first. You can talk about a universal advent where heaven will pass away with a great noise and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Really, that's got to take place in you first. You see, and the elements that will melt away with fervent heat is not the sun, the moon, the stars, and the mountains, and the ocean, and all that good stuff. The elements that are going to melt away with fervent heat is the carnal concepts that we had from being a creature of earthly flesh. Those are the elements. That's what must be done away with. And the flashing of the Shekinah must flash in your understanding, in your illumination. And when the Shekinah flashes in your heart and mind, you see, then all the carnal concepts that you had about yourself and that you had about the world around you, you see, and your heavenly Father, then that will melt away with fervent heat, you see. But anyway, let me continue on. 9th verse. Be diligent to come to me quickly, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed from Thessalonica. Crescens for Galatia, Titus for only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for the ministry. I have sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas when you come, and the books, especially the parchments. I'm going to read that again. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for the ministry. Now, this is Paul talking to Timothy. Titus, I have sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas when ye come, and the books, especially the parchments. You see. Now, again, I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone that has experienced anything. But if you could see the charts, as I was privileged to see the charts that Dr. Kinley created, and I count that as a blessing, you see, being able to witness to that is not the blessing that we all should want, you see, but I was privileged, I'll say, to be able to see the charts that Dr. Kinley created, and they're still down there on display in the school, you see, and there's tapes and videos all on YouTube of some people displaying his charts, some with permission, some without permission, you see, because they are copywritten. You see, and the reason he did that, it wasn't because, like I told you in last week's episode, you see, Dr. Kinley could have been a multimillionaire. The same people that sponsored Reverend Billy Graham offered him the same deal, and he turned it down, you see. And he had many other opportunities to make millions and millions of dollars. But again, compared to what he experienced on June the 6th, 1931, what did he care about being a millionaire in this world? This benighted world that he was going to have to leave behind anyway. Did you see? Somebody say, yeah, but he could have did his family a lot of good even if he didn't want it, or his friends. What did his family a lot of good is listening to those who did listen, because not everyone in his family did. For years, his wife, Katie, didn't believe that he had a spiritual experience. And she confessed many years later that it was years before she actually believed him. The same with his children. Some of his children believed him and some of them didn't, you see? So, again, you see, you can take these things to heart or you can dismiss them, you see? But if you take them to heart, one thing I know that they will have an effectual working in you, you see, and you will be elevated off this plane in a way that you have never been before. Now, going back, because we only got a few moments left, going back to where he said that he was commanded to lay his body down, and he said they awaited the Elohim of glory, or the Elohim of creation, I believe it was, something to that effect. I'm not going to go back and read it because it'll just kind of take up even more time. You can go back and listen to the episode if you like. And then he goes on to say, once the Elohim appeared to him, you see, that they did not, or Elohim did not present himself as the great source of power that he and Moses felt Elohim to be, but he toned himself down. You see, part of the pamphlet begins to go into why Dr. Kinley wrote the things that he wrote. And he's kind of speaking in a second person perspective, why the author did this and why the author said this. And so it switches from first person to second person. So if you were a bit perplexed by that, it's because he's switching from first person perspective to second person perspective. And so at that point, when the Elohim presents himself to him and Moses, now Elohim, and I've gone into this, would be the Word. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, there has been contestation, there has been debate about, is God a, you see, energy field, a great blob of nothingness, you see, from which all things come? Or is he an anthropomorphic being? Dr. Kinley is the only person that I know of, and I've listened to many metaphysical teachers, and I'm not saying that they were false in their teachings, but he is the only person that I know of that explains how God can be symbolized by something like a cloud and yet still be anthropomorphic. And he goes over into Exodus and shows how that it was a cloud that led the children of Israel out of Egypt. And when he begins to explain to his students in the school about Yahweh, he uses a cloud to represent Yahweh. And he says that in that state, Yahweh is the source. In that state where he's representing him as a cloud, he is the source, the substance, the limits, and the bounds of everything. And then he also says that he is anthropomorphic, though. So he's saying that while God is the source, the substance, the limits, and the bounds of all things, it's not enough just to describe him as being some energy field, because you are anthropomorphic, and that word anthropomorphic just means in the shape and form of a man. Anthro meaning shape and form, morphic means man. So that just means that God appeared to him and Moses in shape and form of a human being. Now that should be, in line with you, because you should say, well, I have that shape. So if we're made in the likeness and image of the Creator, it would make sense that God appears to him in the shape and form of a man, because if he appeared to him in the shape and form of a goat, and we're made in his likeness and his image, then that would be a little off. And that was one of the reasons why the children of Israel had no business going back down into the wilderness of Sinai and building a golden calf and saying this being the God. Because the 70 elders that went up into Mount Sinai with Moses. And it says over in Exodus 24:9 and 10, you can go read it yourself, that they saw the God of Israel in a vision, and they describe him as having a body and hands and feet. Now, the only thing that's not described over there is the face. John describes the face over in the last part of the Bible in his writings, you see. But the face was left out for superior reasons, and we'll go into that at another time. But they clearly saw that God was anthropomorphic. Yet, not Moses, not Joshua, but Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders went back down and helped into the encampment and helped the children of Israel build a golden calf, which looked nothing like what they saw upon top Mount Sinai. And they said, "This be the God that brought us out of Egypt and that liberated us." Now, if anything, it would have been better had they built something that was anthropomorphic, because at least that would have been a little closer to what they saw, but they didn't. But anyway, getting back. So with Elohim presenting himself, now there's so much to be said. You see, I told you that Dr. Kinley used a cloud to describe Yahweh or the Lord in his highest, most excellent state. I even mentioned to you that in some Eastern religions, they use water to describe the Creator in his highest state. You see, Dr. Kinley using a cloud because, for one thing, he said a cloud has no particular or descriptive shape and form. Another reason he used a cloud is because another place where you will find something that resembles a cloud is in the man. Now, you say, Elijah, where is it that man has something inside of him that resembles a cloud? Well, that would be your brain. Your brain is a gray and white matter, you see. And within that brain, in the brain, you have something called the arterial circle of Willis. And I just wanted to check real quick to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. But that arterial circle of Willis is 7 blood vessels that come together, and it looks like a man if you ever seen it. If you just Google arterial circle of Willis, it's spelled Arterial, circle of Willis. It is 7 blood vessels coming together in your brain that form the stick figure of a man. So really what you have with the brain and the arterial circle of Willis, it could be likened unto a man in a cloud. And it was a man in a cloud that led the children of Israel up out of Egypt. Because the Creator said, "Behold, I send my angel," over there in Exodus, "I send my angel before you to keep you in the way. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgression." Now, we know that it was a cloud that led them up out of Egypt, but that cloud had an angel within the cloud, you see, which is likened unto the man, and an angel is nothing but a man without flesh and blood. So therefore, just like they were led up out of Egypt by a man in the cloud or an angel in the cloud, you also have something inside of you that resembles a man in the cloud, which is your brain in the arterial circle of Willis. Now, getting back to what I was trying to hit on before, with the word or Elohim presenting himself to him and Moses, every word has to have a definition. So the definition of the word over in John, the Messiah writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God," or with Yahweh, "and the Word was Yahweh," or God. You see, now that being said, every word has to have a definition. So the tabernacle, this is what I've been trying to get to for the last 40 plus minutes. The tabernacle would be the definition of the word that was presented to Moses and Dr. Kinley. And if you want to see how the tabernacle looked, all you have to do is Google tabernacle pattern, and it'll show you how that the tabernacle pattern was threefold in its makeup. And that pattern was really the definition of the word that was revealed to John on the Isle of Patmos and Moses and Dr. Kinley on Mount Sinai. And so with them seeing that, They saw the word or Elohim transfigure, and you can read this in the pamphlet, into the tabernacle pattern. And not only being the word, but presenting itself or himself as the definition of the word. And what Dr. Kinley is going on to say is that that pattern or that word is the thing that all things were made by. Because just as the word or the tabernacle is threefold in its makeup, everything in the universe is threefold in its makeup. That's why in the first book that Dr. Kinley put out, it was called God, the archetype, and the word archetype means original pattern of the universe. And all a pattern does is repeat itself, you see. And that pattern had three compartments. And you can read about the tabernacle pattern over in Exodus, the 25th chapter. I'm just going to read a little bit real quick because the vision on top Mount Sinai, Moses is commanded to go back into the encampment and build the tabernacle. And that's over in Exodus, the 25th chapter, in around the well, we're going to start at the 8th verse. And I'm just going to pick up on this one part. And I promise we're not going to read much of it because I know some of y'all get real anxious when we start reading too much and real sleepy like. So Exodus 25 and 8, and he tells Moses, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I showed you. Where and when did he show them? In the mount, on top Mount Sinai. Because remember, Moses, if you don't know, Moses was called up into the mountain 3 times on 3 separate occasions, you see. And so it says, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you. That is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits shall be its length. And I'm not going to go into all of that. It just kind of goes into all the furnishings in the ark of the covenant and everything that what was going to go inside of it. And Dr. Kinley, oh gosh, there's so much to say. Dr. Kinley went about to show, and in his tabernacle pattern pamphlet, there were several pamphlets. There were dozens of pamphlets. In his pamphlet titled "The Tabernacle of Man," I believe it was, he goes in to show how that every organ, every major organ in man's body is correlated to the tabernacle pattern. And he goes about to show how that man is threefold in all of his makeup, and how having a head cavity, a chest cavity, and an abdomen points to the fact, and I brought this up last week, that the Father, the Word or Son, and the Holy Spirit, these three are one, you see. And how that a cell, everything being made up of cells, is a nucleolus, a nucleus in a cell body, and that an atom is a proton, a neutron, and an electron. You see, that pretty much covers everything. You see, man can only speak past, present, and future. You see, I mean, there's just so many different things. Water is a gas, liquid, and a solid. Oh my gosh, it will overwhelm you. All of the myriad examples and witnesses to the threefold nature of the tabernacle pattern. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on that and continue on just giving a solid, explanation of that, which you always feel like you never give a solid enough explanation. But like I said, we're not going to exhaust any of these topics, guys. I just wanted to give more of an explanation of that reading. And the bottom line to the entire thing is that it's not about the acquisition of a whole lot of knowledge. It's not about, you see, you and me being Bible scholars or becoming metaphysical teachers. You see, it's about you recognizing what the Apostle Paul said over in Colossians 1 and 26, the Messiah in you, you see. And Dr. Kinley said you should add only in that. You see, it says the Messiah in you, the hope of glory. Dr. Kinley said, no, say the only hope of glory, because it is your only hope of glory. We can do a lot of things in this world thinking that we will have glory. You see, getting a job, you see, raising a family, having a home, you see, retiring, you see, or whatever, getting married, you see, winning the lottery, you see, or whatever you want to name that you may think will give you glory, winning the Super Bowl or the playoffs or anything. You see, I told you before, I think it was the football player Emmett Smith. My brother was I was always more of a car enthusiast, but my brother was a huge football fan when he was younger. He still is, and he used to love, but he was a huge fan of the Cowboys in his younger days. I think he's kind of switched teams. I don't know. He might still be a Cowboys fan. I'm not sure. I haven't really asked him lately. But the football player Emmett Smith, after the Cowboys had won one of their Super Bowls, I think they won a few times when he was on the team. But after he won for the first time, he said he woke up the next morning having spent the whole season, practicing and trying to reach this goal of getting to the Super Bowl, or really even before that, just getting to the point where they're eligible for the Super Bowl. And then going be past being eligible for the Super Bowl to finding out that the Cowboys would be in the Super Bowl. And then not only finding out from going to being eligible to winning the Super Bowl, you see, he had all that built up expectation. But yet, after he won, he said he woke up the next morning, or they won rather. He said he woke up the next morning and he said to himself, Is that all? And I think there's an old classic song, maybe came out in the 40s or the 50s, that says, Is that all? The woman just goes through the whole song saying she did this, she did that. And then she had to say after she did it, Is that all? And we have all these goals. Oh, I can't wait to do this. I can't wait to do that. Oh, if I can finally do this. And if you're honest with yourself, the feeling that you end up having afterwards is, dang, is that all? Because here's the reason. You cannot satisfy a spirit being, which Dr. Kinley did his best, and Neville, and other metaphysical teachers, you see, who were preaching the gospel in truth, in spirit and in truth. You see, they did their best to make us to know we are not these physical bodies. But as Job said, there is a spirit in man, you see. Now, you cannot take a spirit being and satisfy it with physical things. That would be like me taking my car, you see, and pulling up now the car might be on E, you see, and I pull up to the grocery store and I run in and I say, yeah, well, you don't say anything. You just go back there and get what you need. And I go back there and get 12 gallons of orange juice. And I pull up to the counter, and the woman says, or the man says, whoever, oh, you must have a lot of sick people in your house, or you're just like OJ. And I say, no, my car is on E. And they look at me like, this fool getting 12 gallons of orange juice because his car is on E. And I tell them, yeah, bag that up for me, and I'm going to, push it out to the car. And then I begin filling my car up. Now, you laugh. I know some of you saying, what a silly example. But it's getting the point across. I begin filling my car up with the OJ. And then I get back inside and I start it up and it's still not starting. Nothing is happening. It's still, why? Because I attempted to satisfy it with something that it couldn't be satisfied with. What would have been better than going to go get the orange juice is pulling up at a gas station and putting some gas inside of it. Why? Because that's what would satisfy the car. Now you say that's silly, that's stupid, but then if it's so stupid, why do we try to satisfy a spirit being with physical things? If it's so stupid, why are you doing it? Why am I doing it? Why are we still every day trying to satisfy a spirit being with something physical? I don't care if it's a marriage or a spouse. I don't care if it's sex. I don't care if it's money. I don't care if it's food. I don't care if it's drugs. I don't care if it's alcohol. Why do we continue to try to get into heaven the wrong way? Because that's all you're doing when you try to satisfy the spirit with something physical. All somebody who is drinking and doing drugs is doing is trying to get into heaven in an erroneous or false way. And what's going to happen is they're going to keep getting sent right back down to the earth, psychologically speaking. Oh, it's fun when you're going up there. It's fun when you're bending the elbow and throwing it back or shooting up, whatever the case may be. But eventually, with those highs, you have to come back down because you're trying to get into heaven the wrong way. When you try to satisfy the inner man or the inner being with physical things, you're trying to get into heaven the wrong way. So, anyway, I hope I was able to give some clarification. You always feel like you didn't do a good enough job, but I'll probably feel that way with every video. So that's okay. My teacher, Dr. Harris, used to talk about how he would lecture and go home and kind of sit in his chair that we were also familiar with for those of us that would come by his place and sit and talk with him. And he said he would sit there sometimes and kind of wonder if he got the message across clearly. And Dr. Kinley, from my understanding, did the same thing. And I know Neville talked about doing the same thing. You always wonder, did I say it clear enough? Did I? No, not that you have the power to make anybody understand. I always say, John 14 and 26, there's only one that has the power to make anybody understand. And trust me, they knew that. These men knew that, you see. But you still want to do your best to try to make it as simple as possible. So you always lament the fact, oh, maybe I should have said this, or maybe I should have brought this up, you see. But you just have to throw your hands up and give it to the Holy Spirit and trust that whoever was meant to understands or understood, and whoever is meant to get something out of it, you see, will get something out of it, you see. And with that, folks, I say continue on looking within, you see, and remember that the light afflictions that you and I are going through now on this lower plane is working for us a far more exceeding weight of eternal glory, you see. But the thing that we want and the thing we have to focus on every single day, you see, as Paul said, examine yourself, you see. Firstly, you have to be given the eyes to examine yourself, you see. And once you're given those eyes, you can see that there's always going to be growth to do. See, the Apostle Paul talked about in the ages to come, you see, how that the Heavenly Father will show of his exceeding riches and kindness towards us, you see. So there's going to be an eternal building up. Right now, we're just newborn babes, you see, barely starting, you see. And it will be a glorious, eternal journey, you see, that we will go on. So I thank everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe if you care to. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.